As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. Let's jump into some news, guys. I've got a couple of stories here that I think we should touch on. And the first one is, the headline here is Gaming Insiders Spooked by Pay for Engagement Plans. And the article goes on to talk about how Google has announced that they're going to pay developers. This is related to Stadia. They're going to pay developers based on how much their games are played. And the concern is that this engagement-based payment is going to incentivize developers to make games that are either very long or that you have to log in every day to play. And basically, the way it's going to work, according to this article, and I think this was directly from Google's announcement, Stadia isn't logging total hours. Instead, it's looking at daily check-ins. So if a player plays a game for 2 days, they call that 2 months of engagement. Right, assuming it's one is in 1 month, one is in the next month kind of thing. And so it's not, it's not just you're logging in and playing for 10 hours and therefore we're going to pay you more for the game. It's we're going to reward people who just log in at all or check in at all. Who here thinks, and Jimmy, maybe start with you. Jimmy M, start with you. What do you think happens to developers for Stadia here? Do you think that we actually end up seeing games that are longer or that have incentives for people to check in more often? Or do you think people just revolt and say, hey, Google, we don't want to do this, right? We want to make the games we want to make. If you're gonna play games like this, forget about it. We're not going to develop for your platform. I'm curious, where are you at on this one?
I strongly believe, we've seen so many games turn to games as a service, so it sort of makes sense in that regard. But even then, if I'm a game developer and I'm looking at this sort of relationship between me and Stadia, I'd want to be paid up front for the product that I'm offering them, because if I'm creating a product that's not meant to be played as a service, not meant to be logged in every day, you progress through this game, chronologically, and then at some point you're done. If I'm creating a game like that, I don't know how I feel about this. I'm very, very much like, no, my game has a set amount of engagement, has a set amount of hours that you're going to play it, and then you're done. It's like watching a movie. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be watching the movie every single day. I go to watch the movie, I watch it for 2.5 hours, and then I'm out. I have had the experience, and that's what I've paid for. I think if you're creating a game to be played as an experience, it's not something you're going to be a fan of. You are going to revolt and be like, hey, this really doesn't make any sort of sense. But if you're creating games as a service and the initial cost to create the game isn't overwhelming and can be mitigated, then maybe it makes sense to play it, to have it as an engagement play for a long-term strategy. But I think there's going to be a lot of uproar about this.
William, where are you at on this? I know you have interesting insight.
This is an extraordinarily bad idea. Like, it's just a bad idea. And it's a bad idea for just simple reasons. Like, what's the challenge with Stadia, right? Like, we all know platforms are dependent on good exclusive or original games, right? That's what drives platform adoption. If you're a developer and you hear that this is how you're going to be compensated for the game, are you more or less likely to develop for Stadia? I would argue that basically every developer out there is going to be, this is a less appealing monetization structure for them. It moves more risk over to them, right? And worse, it moves risk that seems like the metrics are weirdly calculated. So you could, how would a classic title like Undertale that you can beat in 2 days perform on this? Like, it would look pretty bad, right? And that's Undertale, so I think it has, and then The thing is, it sort of seems to be calling out a problem with the core platform, which is, I believe, an issue with Google Stadia as user adoption. So if it's already a platform that's short on users to drive to your game, why do you want to get paid on engagement per user, right? Like, that seems like a problem Stadia needs to solve. If Stadia had 100 million users they were going to dump on my game, I would feel very differently about this. I'd say, okay, Stadia, that's a risk I'll take. You get 100 million people to play my game. I'll try to make it good enough that they come back month after month. That I can work with. But all in, this just seems like a very odd decision that's going to inhibit quality on the platform. And, you know, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like, this does not make me think Stadia is trending in the right direction.
I mean, guys, don't you feel like, though, it's totally logical from a Google standpoint, right? Put yourself in the Google executive shoes, and they're going, we sell a subscription product. Well, we might as well pay people if they check in every month and continue paying their subscription. You know what I mean? Like, they have, William, you're right, an adoption problem, but they also have a retention problem.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But again, forcing the retention problem off into game devs feels a little,
Right.
like, you know, disingenuous. But also, like, games, this is a fundamental problem, right? Like, games aren't like YouTube videos where maybe this monetization scheme works. Like, I think YouTube, because a really good video that a creator pours their time into, a regular content creator, 20 hours, 30 hours, 40, a good game is years. You know what I mean? So the scale is different. And the YouTube model is already very controversial amongst creators, right? Porting that over to games, again, it just, again, this reads very differently if you are a massively successful platform with tons of users to dump on this. Then this model feels fair to me. It feels like a publisher saying, we will get a lot of people to play the game, but you have to commit that the game is good enough to keep them coming back, because our people are on subscription, so we need you to be making subscription games. That seems fair, but this is only the second part of the promise. We're on a subscription model. We need you to make subscription games. But by the way, we're not, you know, like, deal with all that upfront cost, take that risk yourself, you know. It's a tough pill to swallow. And, you know, I think some devs will swallow it, either because they like the potential of Stadia, or because they're already in development, or because they have a title that they think might port well. You know, some people will take this up, but again, I think Stadia needs a lot of developers to take it up with unique offerings and bold ideas.
The article here mentions that some other subscription services offer a mix of upfront payment and then followed by this engagement-based revenue. It also says that a Google rep declined to specify whether upfront payments are part of this. So I'll take that as no, there are no upfront payments. William, I'm curious what your crystal ball says on this, and that will we see Stadia lose developers, like, fundamentally?
Yes. I would say that, or rather, it will encourage, like, the sorts of developers that might. Well, I mean, let me try to walk that back a little. Yes, I think a lot of developers that wanted to do a heavy investment game will back away from the platform because there's now more risk associated with that business model. I think developers who are looking maybe for more mobile games, and again, we don't know how rewarding this monetization model is on recurring. Like, maybe it's extremely competitive, the compensation on recurring engagement. And Google's actually being generous here and saying, no, you know what? Like, we just want a certain type of game. But what this will do is encourage developers who want to make retention-heavy games come to the platform. I think retention-heavy games are mobile games. I think that's really what this is coded as, right? This is going to make more mobile-type games come to the Stadia platform, faster to develop, check-in loops, you know, all the things we associate with a mobile offering. Maybe that's a good direction for Stadia. Maybe that's how Stadia survives, is kind of an exclusive, you know, mobile store that you can play on your TV. I don't know. I mean, certainly you seemed bullish on Apple Arcade, Paul, and maybe this it feels more like an Apple Arcade-y type of developer incentive.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, Apple Arcade meets the first thing you mentioned, which is Apple has the 100 million or more, right? They have what, like 2 billion iPhones or something, like, you know what I mean? Some massive number. They have that user base. And so I actually don't know what the Apple Arcade model is in the back end for the developers, but assuming it's engagement based, they at least can make that argument that you just made, which is, hey, I'm bringing 100 million people to your game here, so put up with it, kind of thing. It's interesting. It'll be, Stadia has continued to make some poor decisions, it seems. I don't know if this is the nail in the coffin, because I've now probably called a few things the nail in the coffin for Stadia. I'm surprised Google is still making announcements for Stadia at all. I would have expected that to just sort of go away quietly. But they're out there. At least the PR people are working.